youth. Today, this morning, we had a nice discussion, I think, between science from the European Commission and an NGO like Common Land. And this afternoon, we will have a discussion between a nature organization and a water management organization. So that would be nice, I think. Our theme is nature-based solutions for natural hazards, and especially the attention will be on flooding, drought, and nature. So we have succeeded in two perfect speakers, I would say. Esther Blom from the foundation ARK, and Pieper from the Water Authority, the regional water authority, and they will introduce themselves a little bit further than I do, so they can do the best. So I would like to start, because we are a quarter almost later. So Esther, please take the floor.
Thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me? Yes, great. So I'm going to talk about rewilding today and how it could solve some of the societal challenges we face at the moment. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Esther Blom. I'm currently one of the two directors of ARK Nature, Rewilding the Netherlands, as we are called in English. I'm a biologist. Actually, I studied at Utrecht University, so this feels very familiar, actually in this room as well. And ever since my study biology, I always worked for NGOs. All NGOs focused on nature conservation and nature restoration. I worked mostly international in my life, so I worked for WWF Netherlands, for IUCN, together with Willem, who you met this morning. And I worked in Nepal and Tibet, as you can see here, for the Mountain Institute. And at some point at WWF, I noticed that it started to feel a little uncomfortable to work on the Yangtze, the Himalayas. Well, there's so much work to do in my own country. So lots of nature to restore, especially. And also that I think that the Netherlands could be a very good example for other countries what not to do in terms of destruction of nature, but also what to do in terms of restoration of nature. We have some great examples like Room for River, and that are the kinds of examples that I really wanted to push. So I shifted to ARK, and ARK is not a very well-known organization, also not in the Netherlands, because we are not like a strong brand. We do work a lot with organizations like WWF as partners, but they, of course, with their Panda have a much higher visibility. We are very much focused on getting things done underground, and especially in the field of rewilding. So what we do is that we boost wild nature. We really plead for spontaneous nature that is robust, so large areas, as large as possible. Spontaneous in the sense that you don't want to be the ones deciding which species exactly comes where. It should be like an autonomous process, nature development. We really restore natural processes so that in the end, nature can really thrive, and that you have a lot of interactions between species, between soil and water, and we're just there to observe and to profit from it and to enjoy it. But also, it is very important that this nature in the Netherlands and the surrounding areas where we work is accessible for people, and it has a lot of meaning for people. So what we do is that we develop challenging concepts. We think about what could be a wilder step on this ladder of rewilding. Could we have like big carnivores back, really natural forests back? And that are more like the theoretical concepts that we plead for, but we also always try to get this done in practice. So we start with pilot projects to really showcase what happens if you, well, work with nature in such a way. Furthermore, we do on area development. I don't know, it's not a very correct English term, but what I mean is that we really develop agricultural lands in the Netherlands to new nature. Very sensitive topic, of course, but so far so good for us. And we do a lot of inspirational education to also inspire the next generation, so that they're also the biologists and the nature conservers are not just focused on habitat types, very administrative systems, but really think about the opportunities that nature can have. Well, you see a lot of emphasis where we work on the south of the Netherlands and the center parts, not so much in the north. We are the organizations that once started Living Rivers program, so Room for Rivers in the Millingerwaard. I think you may visit that area in the coming days, perhaps. It's now a state forestry area, but it used to be an ARC area. So keep that in mind if you visit. It's really where we started small-scale showcasing, which is now, well, magnified to almost the whole river system in the Netherlands. So a short rewilding definition, because it's a relatively new concept. Rewilding is really about repairing the key natural processes, organization, and functioning of degraded ecosystems and landscapes in order to make these landscapes more self-sustaining and self-organizing. So that's what we call a multi-solving approach. These more resilient landscapes, they are more like future-proof and robust to cope with the rapid human-induced changes, for example, climate change. It also proves to be more effective in preserving the biodiversity, if you do it on a large enough scale, of course. It provides a lot of benefits to to people, which I will further dive into with some examples, but also it's cheaper. If you compare it with the very intense management systems that you see in the Netherlands for the nature reserves, the approach of just taking a step back, letting go, is cheaper, and well, you get the nature that really wants to be there. Instead of mowing, plowing, cutting, we just say, okay, let the grasses do the work. Well, there are some conditions. Of course, you have to have large enough spatial skills and enough time. In the Netherlands, we're very eager to have a kind of results within a year. Okay, then we want that species back. Very impatient, but it's also about, okay, let's see what happens in 10, 20, 30 years. Really involve local people from the start, from day one, even there's nothing to be seen, we already start taking children into nature. And we have to be very transparent. We're not like an organization that keeps yelling, oh, we have fantastic results, but we also communicate about the things that are hard for us to do or that failed. So I brought with me two examples. One example is really on large scale system changes in the delta of the Netherlands. And the other one is about what you can really already do at a small scale in terms of management. But both the examples really are about how they mitigate things like floods, fire, droughts. Many of you are not from the Netherlands. We have a very complex water system in the Netherlands, as you will also hear from Hein, I guess. It's a highly modified system, very intensely managed. So I need a little bit to explain a little bit how our system works. As you can see, we are currently here, and this is the whole river system that flows into this delta. So we are delta receiving the water from the Rhine and the Meuse. In this area, the southwest delta of the Netherlands. Well, delta systems are very special. There's a highly dynamic interaction between salt, fresh and brackish water, high tide, low tide, very high food availability, and it's changing all the time. So never 1 second is the system the same. There's only a specific amount of species that are really adapted to this dynamic system, and these are species that can really often only live in these very tiny areas around the world that we call estuaries, deltas. And because of this high food availability, the areas are very important for migratory birds that feed during their migration in this part of the world from Africa to Siberia, for example. So only a few weeks per year they feed, but it's such a small but highly important place for the survival of these species. But also, it's not just a flyway, it's also a swimway. So to reach the rivers, they have to be able to enter the delta system and to adapt to the new freshwater or saltwater conditions, to feed and to sometimes to spawn in these places. So it's an international cross point for world nature. As most of you know, we highly modified the delta after the floods in '53 to make our place a safer place. But this came with a price. There's now a hard barrier between this open river and the sea. So you have dams now, different dams between the different water arms with different kinds of systems. And as WWF and ARC in the last decade, we really tried to come up with a vision how you can restore the natural processes despite these big changes. It's not like you develop a small kind of nature area where you have some kind of interaction between sea and freshwater, and then you have a great example. It's not possible. It's like all or nothing. You have the dam there, and it's either getting the dam removed, and then you have an open, unsafe system, or nothing. So that's our challenge, how to come up with nature-based solution in this highly modified system. Well, there's only one open connection at the moment that's permanently open. That is in the middle of Rotterdam and the port of Rotterdam. So there you have space, there you have openness for the migratory fish, but it's a city and it's an industrial zone. So that's also a big challenge. And then in red, you see the surface of estuarine nature that has vanished in the last decade. So some areas were increased, but mostly decreased. So how to get back these estuarine ecosystems, but in the meantime also see how this could benefit the people. That's where we developed the vision for, and we are now pushing this at the Delta program, and we think it's possible to get back a tidal system in the Haringvliet. The Haringvliet is one of the river arms over here. So now you have the Haringvliet Dam. This is freshwater, this is saltwater sea. And we think it's possible to manage this area as a storm surge barrier. So only close it in times of very high tide and very high water discharge from the river. And you get an 80 to 100 centimeters tidal system back. It means a lot of changes to the freshwater system for agriculture as well. That's also what we did a lot of calculations for. But if you have an open system in here, it doesn't mean that you have nature back, because the water table is increasing in terms of climate change. So the river banks are only even more flooded in the coming 100 years. So we came up with a new idea, which is called double dikes, the dubbele dijken. At the moment you have the dikes along the river arm, and there immediately behind you have the agricultural system. This land is subsiding because that's what happens if you have intense agriculture without flooding, without the sediments in the delta, so becoming more unsafe. So we plead for giving up temporarily this agricultural land by opening the first dike. You have the old second dike here, and when it floods, it brings in the sediment, and then you get this process back as growing with the sea. In the Netherlands, we started to exist as a country because we grew with the sea, and if there's floods with sediments coming in and out, then you get this estuarine system back, and the land grows. And this is good for safety because you get a higher landscape and you have more room to store your water in terms of high water discharge. Then in say 60 years, the land is high enough again to become agricultural land again. That's why we call it wisselpolder, a polder that changes in land use system. And you can maintain a part of the estuarine system. And another nature-based solution is the fact that these dikes don't have to be this high again, because you get this area that decreases the energy of the waves. So this is one of the examples that we are now trying to pilot. But in the meantime, we're also doing things that can be done now. So we work large scale in and around Rotterdam on tidal parks. These are river banks that are now stoned, very steep, but that become more shallow and less steep. And then you get small areas of tidal nature back in the middle of the city. And Rotterdam and Rijkswaterstaat is one of our main partners in this, as well as the Port of Rotterdam. And a lot of people in the city can profit from it because it also gives them extra area for recreation, as well as reduction of heat in times of climate change. So lots of examples. We also have a very ambitious idea about the shoaling of the river mouth. Considering the time, I cannot really dive into this, but a very brief summary. This is currently the entrance of large shipping, large navigation channel for the Port of Rotterdam, but it's 16-meter dredged every a few years for these big ships. That's why a lot of the water needs to be pushed through the Nieuwe Waterweg to combat salinization from the ocean, from the sea system. So we plead for making that more shallow and having more water get through this system, which is the Haringvliet again, that we want to open. And we can only open the Haringvliet if there's enough fresh water to push out the salt water. Well, as you may be able to understand, this is not a quick fix, no low-hanging fruit, but it's a scenario that's now seriously looked at by the Delta program, and we have a good stage there to discuss this. In the meantime, as I said, we're doing future work, but also doing stuff now. We are reintroducing the Atlantic sturgeon. Not because it has a very big role in the ecosystem, but because it's a great flagship species. Why are we doing this? What are we doing it for? Is for this fish species, 2 meters tall, 200 kilograms. It used to be one of the common fishes in the Dutch river system, and we can get it back. And in the ocean, in the North Sea, we are currently working on the restoration of shellfish, reefs. And well, the fun thing is that it also decreases the energy from the sea if we do it at large enough scale, and we combine it with wind energy. It's also of course, for the ecology. 30% of the North Sea used to be shellfish banks, but it's totally different reference we have of the North Sea in the Netherlands. We think it's just an endless sand dune under the water. So this is some examples we are doing, and that are sometimes relatively easy, sometimes future and more visionary and very difficult. One example, how many minutes do I have left?
5.
Okay. 5, yay! 5, I'll take 5. More easy work, relatively, is our work on natural grazing. This is the work we already started 35 years ago. Like I said, in the Netherlands, there's a highly intensive management system of most of the nature reserves. And we were kind of forgotten that in the prehistoric times, there were no things like plowing machines, like mowing machines. And there was nature to do that kind of work. So we started to reintroduce and to bring back the natural grazers, often proxies of the real wild species that we used to have, like rhinoceros, the wild bovines we used to have in the Netherlands. We tried to bring them back, but that was very successfully, and we're showcasing many areas what it brings us. It brings natural dung that is kind of a biodiversity explosion if you don't give your natural herds medicines. You see all kinds of micro reliefs, so small changes in the ecosystem, but also large changes with mosaic vegetation systems that really bring back other species, but also a higher variety of species. So many ecological examples and advantages. We also brought back the bison, by the way, in 4 places in the Netherlands, and that originally native species of the Netherlands, again, has its own big impact on the ecosystem, and is very surprising to see in such a dense country as the Netherlands. Internationally, I forgot to tell, we were one of the founders of Rewilding Europe. They are somewhat more famous than Art Nature, so maybe you do know them. And together with Rewilding Europe, we looked at the international advantages of grazing for combating forest fires. So that's mostly at stake in the south of Europe, of course, and in the center. There's a lot of land abandonment in these areas, so lots of herding systems are collapsing. And what you see happening is that the vegetation density, the biomass increases, which make these areas very prone to fire. So what we did is we researched the impact if you would bring back natural grazing systems in these areas. And we also worked with farmers and herders to see if we could cooperate, and well, Rewilding Europe is doing that successfully in many places to bring the natural herds back for biodiversity, as well as to reduce the fuel loads. And it was also scientifically studied that indeed herbivores can mitigate the wildfire damage, depending on factors like the density of the herds, which species, combinations of species is the best, horses and bovines, and other environmental conditions. So we really plea for using natural herds in nature management in forest fire prone areas like Portugal, Greece. And in the Netherlands, this is my final example, we're actually quite common or used to work with natural herds to prevent flooding. It's, well, even Rijkswaterstaat includes grazing in its systems to calculate the safety of river floodplains. This is an example of the Grensmaas. It's the border river in the south between Belgium and the Netherlands. It's a gravel river where we worked a lot with gravel and sand miners to recreate the natural floodplains and to prevent that these floodplains immediately become forest. From the start of this program, like 20 years ago, natural herds were introduced at large scale in these floodplains. So they suppress the vegetation development, and this immensely contributes to the water safety because there's less vegetation to block the water. So you have a better through flow, and it's very important to start immediately with introducing grazers after the excavation. It's very important to have year-round grazing for this. If you only have summer grazing, it doesn't work because you want the grazers to eat the woody vegetation in the winter. That's what they do. In the winter you have less herbs, so they shift to woody vegetation, and that's the kind of vegetation you want to suppress. We also found in a European study that we did that the more natural the herd is, the better they manage these areas, because natural herds, that means with as many bulls as female cows, that you don't, that they stay together for a long time. They have much more self-confidence, these herds, and they explore the whole areas. So they really graze the whole area and not so much only the areas that they know. They're more, well, tough, so to say. So that was my final example of working with nature. Well, as an organization, we have like 50 more, but that would mean talking to you a whole more day. And one more plea for, as you know, it's the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. And I really want to keep in mind that, well, we have only 8 more years to achieve this goal. So good, thank you for helping with that.
Thank you, Esther, for your inspiring presentation, because, yeah, I'm a real Dutchman and I didn't know what you have achieved in such a time. And it proves to be, again, that nature is really, really resilient. And if we want, we can get it there.
Yeah,
so
let's hope so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then our next speaker is Hein Pieper from the Water Authority.
Yeah.
And of course, he had already had some advices from Esther about how to do about water management, but probably he will react on that. They have to change the mic.
Change.
Then you can take a pink.
That could be.
Hein, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still awake after the next 20 minutes. I will do my best to keep you awake. My name is Hein Pieper. I'm a dijkgraaf. I like that name. And you can ask a Dutchman here or in the room what the right translation is from a dijkgraaf. President, no, but something like the chair or president of a regional water authority in the Netherlands. But I like the title of dijkgraaf more. It gives some nobility to the position. I'm also the president of the European organization, a water management organization of Europe, where a lot of countries in Europe are a member. Altogether, 8,600 local organizations. And I was, until January, a member of the Mission Board on Climate Adaptation and Societal Transformation in Brussels. We talked about how can we solve, how should Europe solve the challenge of climate change by climate adaptation. Mostly if we don't say change or stop climate change, all the climate adaptation is only buying time. That's the, I think, the most important thing. I would like to tell you a little bit about the history of water management, water authorities in the Netherlands. We were founded almost 900 years ago. The water authority of this region will celebrate his 900 years of existence in the next years. So we are much older than the country of the Netherlands. They are only 400, 450 years old. That's not much. A long history. We were in the past 3,500 water authorities. In 1950, there were still 2,500, and now we are only 21. And that is because of the, I think, the challenges and the big changes that we are facing today. Maybe it is a little bit better for me. Because of the long history, we have always in our approach a long vision approach. It's not, we do no projects for the next years. We always look ahead 10, 20, even 100 years. For us, it is important not only to see the next 4 years as a politician and to think, how can I run my next campaign? No, we are responsible for still living here in this area for the next 100, maybe 900 years, if possible. Yes? You have to fix something. Yeah, but... Okay, I try to do that. We have our own tax system, and that our municipalities, our provinces don't have, only the government has, and the water authorities in the Netherlands. And we raise about 3 billion euros a year. That's 1.6% of all the taxes that are raised in the Netherlands. And that is earmarked money. And it gives us the possibility to spend that money only for the tasks that we have. We don't have to compete with healthcare, we don't have to compete with education, we don't have to compete with infrastructure. This is our money, and we have to invest it in the water system, water management of the Netherlands. And maybe you don't know, but we have our own bank, the Water Authority Bank of the Netherlands. One of the 110 system banks in Europe, and the last big stress test last year, we were more than best of class. And why? Because we are very conservative. As told already, we were built by the sea and the rivers, the sedimentation of the rivers. And in the past, the people who were living here thought maybe we should take a small part of the sea and we take another part of the sea, and so we created the Netherlands. And that makes us a very interesting delta, very safe delta for a long period already, but also a very vulnerable delta, because we are in Europe the most vulnerable place to live in. If you live in the Netherlands without dikes, almost 50 to 60% could be flooded. And not only from the sea, but also from the rivers. Okay. What do the water authorities do? Flood defense, of course, with our big sister, Rijkswaterstaat, very big sister, but still a sister, not a mother. And we also do water management, of course, and the water treatment, this is the wastewater of the Netherlands. More than half of the 3 billion goes to cleaning the wastewater. And we do that also, we try to do that as bio-based, natural as possible. In my water authority, we are cleaning it. We are cleaning the sludge also, and we have a new technique, not with the University of Utrecht, but the University of Delft, to take out the jackets of the bacteria, and that it's the biggest combination of protein and sugar that you can find in nature. And there, with that new material, we can replace all the plastics in the world. So that's also something we are trying to do as water authorities, to become secular in, secular in at least 2050, but if possible 2040. And we are trying to become energy neutral by 2025. Then we will be the first layer of government in the Netherlands that is completely independent from fossil fuel. And maybe we are trying to make a little bit more, because we are already the biggest biogas producer in the Netherlands, almost 150 million cubic meter we can produce. And that's not so, that's a less nicer message for Putin, if he could improve that a little bit. Okay, this is my water authority. It's in the east, so I have neighbors not only from the Netherlands, but also from Germany. They're very nice people until now. And we have, the borders are, does dit work? Met het lampje, hoe werkte dat, Esther, het lampje? Oké, toch. Ik zeg niet. Je hebt hem liggen, ja, toch wel. This is the Rhine, the River Rhine, and this is the River IJssel, and then you have here a smaller river called Buursebeek, and then Schipbeek here, and you have the smaller. You have 3,500 kilometers of rivers and small, even small ditches, I would say, but not everything what has water is from the water authority. And this part, there is almost no river, very, very small ones are, but this is from us because the wastewater of this area is going to the biggest wastewater plant we have nearby. Okay. In the past, the fence, cleaning, and responsible for the water management, but nowadays our biggest challenge is climate change, and that all the focus of the water authority in the Netherlands go to the climate change. And then we have the two big extremes. We have the extreme of the floods, and that can be locally in a village. We had in 2010 a big flood in only 3 villages, but the damage was already severe, tens of millions. In the south, we had last year a big flood, I think you know that, in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. More than 220 people were killed, and the damage was more than 40 billion euros. In the Netherlands, we had no casualties. I think because of what we did with Room for the River, smaller rivers, and the river moves. This was the water bomb. We know, Deltares did a search for us. This water bomb, it's a Belgian name, they call it water bomb, can happen everywhere in the Netherlands, everywhere. So also, maybe here in Utrecht, or maybe near Amsterdam, maybe on Schiphol, and you couldn't leave Schiphol in the next 2 weeks. It's not possible today also, but that has another reason, I think. In the same time, we had dry, 3 very dry years. In 18, 19, and 20, we started with a too wet spring, and then it hit us severe, and mostly this area here. This was the area that was extremely dry, there was no water left in our streams. And we have a big discussion in the Netherlands about water quality, and I think Esther is trying to tell us that water quality is also something that comes with a restoration of nature. But if there is no water, there is also no water quality, and there is also no life left. And what we saw in our rivers, streams, etc., was that all the fishes died. We had investment for the quality of the water for tens of millions, and it was gone in 2 years, 2 summers. All the investments that we did. In my area, we have maybe the next one. No, I will go back a little bit. In my area, you have the river here. It's called the river Oude, I have to look, Doesburg. Here, it's the Oude Rijn, it's called. It's the first river that is completely restored for the fish migration in the Netherlands. But in 1920, we couldn't have fish migration because of the lack of water. That was a real problem for us. So the biggest question, there's also a question from me to Esther, is nature restoration, nature of the past, nature of the present, or nature of the future. Because what we see in our part of the Netherlands is that the nature is changing. And we can't remain the nature of the past, even not from the present. Certain trees are dying, certain species of trees are dying, and we can't replace them. It's not possible. We see the same with some animals in the streams or in the rivers. So the biggest question also for us, we would like to do as much as possible because with nature, because we don't think that the problems are engineerable anymore in our days. But the biggest problem is for us, which nature? Should we more look to the Provence for the nature in the next years? So if we more spend our money in making wine and a drier area, or should we still try to restore what we have? I don't know. I'm really confused about that. Okay, we are the biggest organization of drainage in the world, I think. We were a very good delta, and now we are a delta becoming drier and drier and drier. And the problem is, I think, was created more than 40, 50 years ago. Oops. What we saw is that this was in the past, in the year 1000, there was a lot of swamps and in this area of my water authority, and there we built, because the people would like to have it for agriculture, but also to live in houses and for infrastructure, for factories, etc. But there is a kind of created a kind of problem, and now we have too little water. And I was told that in this period we had 50 years of drought. And there was no problem for the Netherlands because we had enough water, groundwater in the soil. But if we have another 50 years of drought, we will go in the wrong direction. We take at least 20 measures in our water authorities, and the bigger the word cloud is, the more effect these measures have. They are technical, nature-based, but the word solutions means that they are technical also. But we are trying to find a kind of solutions in small areas, because we don't have the big areas anymore for projects as Room for the River. We have to find solutions for cities, in cities, nearby cities. We are trying to retain the water in lakes, but we don't have a lot of lakes in my area. We are trying to retain them in the capillaries of the water system, and that is, I think, a big success. More than half of the farmers want to have it. Those small weirs and small dams in their ditches. That means they will have a water problem in the spring, and they would like to go on the land to have the manure on the land as soon as possible, because as the temperature is going up, the plants will grow. But what I saw in the last years, we are doing it for 4 years now, that farmers in half of my area to say, okay, I will take another week or 2 before I will go to work my land. And we have this year again a dry spring. They're sending us now pictures. You can see that there is still water in my ditch, and where there is no dam, there is no weir, all the water is gone. And what we are trying is to restore at least the groundwater level with 40 till 50 centimeters in our area. But that's not possible everywhere, because, as I told you, there were house building, there were cities created, and if we would bring the draining system up with 40 or 50 centimeters, we would have a lot of protest from citizens. I don't think with tractors, but there will be an uprising in our part. But the most important thing is here, when we are we had more than 400 conversations with farmers, with landowners on the kitchen table, at the kitchen table, where we spoke with them and find tailor-made solutions. So we call that program Every Drop Counts. It's built on relationship, long-term vision, and trying to do tailor-made solutions with the owners of the land. The biggest problem is for us money. And I hear you say you have a bank, you have enough money. That's true, but we can't spend all the money on one project. We also have to retain and restore the dikes. In my part, it will cost $250 million the next years. This project will cost 1.5 billion euros. And then I still have the cleaning of the wastewater. So altogether, with a budget of 120 to 130 billion every year, that's too much. We have to choose. But we would like to do all those projects together, and therefore what we choose is find solution in the relationship, find solution in working together with nature organizations, work together with municipalities, but most of all with the landowners. They have also the benefits, and they have to see that they have the benefits of those projects. Okay. We started a big program, soil care. It's not our core business, but we started it 8 years ago to restore the organic matter content of the soil, to restore the sponge of the soil. Because if the organic matter is sufficient, then the farmer can win at least 8 to 14 days in a drought period. And biodiversity in the land will go up. It's for the biodiversity very important to have a big amount of organic matter content. This is not our core business. It's something we don't have to do, but we are doing this because we are in relationships with the farmers and we are helping them. We hope that therefore we have enough trust for other measures we have to take. We are working together with citizens and yes, oh, 5, I thought 3. Okay, 3. 1 stone out of the garden, you get a plant, you get 10 stones off the garden, you get a tree, and we already have tens of thousands of plants give to the citizens, and I think more than 5,000 trees already. We are restoring in nearby the estates in our part of the water authority, the water system. We are filling this part we filled up again, but it was a ditch we needed for agriculture on this land, and now the old waterway came back again. This means that the farmer has less income and less harvest on his land. So we have to find ways for him or her, depends on the farmer, to have enough income. And the estate owner, this was a woman, she had still three tenders, and one was thinking about retirement, and now the other 2 can have an income on this land. This means also for her that her beautiful park, where a lot of trees are, can stay alive, because in the past years the trees were dying because of the drought. And she had some problems with her castle in the foundations. There were cracks. This is also a project where we are finding path, because we have a good relationship with all those people. Now, this is the water system, and this is the river base, the basins of the smaller rivers that go through this part of the Netherlands. So for us, Germany is very important. All the projects they do there as good neighbors, they should do as good neighbors and not giving us the problem. So therefore we have a lot of projects together with Germany. I would love to be the Dijkgraaf, the president of all the region, but the Germans say it's a problem. Okay, 2 other things I would like to stress is that a few years back, the Water Authority in the Netherlands started a big program called the Blue Deal, where we are trying to share our knowledge of water management to other countries, mostly vulnerable countries in the world. And we have promised ourselves that we will at least help 20 million people in other countries to sufficient, safe and clean water by 2030. We pay for the program ourselves. We work together with 2 ministries, and we hope that we can solve problems in other countries. We had requested from more than 200 countries to help them. I don't have the people for that. That's too much. So we started with 17 countries, but we even get a request from this country here. I don't know if you know it, but it's USA, and they have some problems with here in the south in New Orleans, and they have built a very nice big dam there for because they had a flood with Katrina, but the UN Corps of Engineers did that, but there is no organization that can maintain that dike. So it will be lost in 5 or 10 years. And they asked us to help them to build up small communities to maintain, because most of the water projects worldwide, also funded by the World Bank, etc., they go by designed, built, neglect. I spoke with the director of the World Bank responsible for the water project. Her organization spent $64 billion on water projects, and it was design, build, neglect. Water, $500 million for water treatment plants. You come after 5 years back, and that's the problem. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the money, they don't have the monitoring. So we do in the Netherlands design, build, maintain. And that's what we are trying to share with our partners in other countries. And we focus on nature-based solutions in all those countries because there is the biggest profit to win. But we should, no, we could do more than 200 countries. Okay. Conclusions. For me, it's very important to see that the foundation of those conclusions, the work that we do, are values. We don't do this because we think it's good, but we do this because we find ourselves convinced by the values of good governance, by trust, by working together with other peoples. Those values are the foundations of our work. For us, it's very important that we recognize these values. And this is one of the biggest challenges we have, even in nature restoration. Our society is falling apart. And we see that today with the farmers. And there is less the knowledge of that we have, that we share the same values. These 3 novels I read, and it's the same. It's an Italian, and this is French. Sorry for I couldn't find the French. And this is a German. And they are telling us, they are mirrors and telling us society is changing. And because why? We are too much focusing only on engineerable things. And we are losing values that restore or build relations between people. For me, good governance is that what we see here in this fresco in Siena, in the old palace, the old government building in Siena. We see the city of Siena. Sorry, ladies, it's a man. It's in the room where the government of Siena was coming together and talking about how we should spend our money and how should we invest and what's important. And the fresco shows, there is one, the fresco shows us the seventh is here somewhere. I lost it on the way to Utrecht. The 7 virtues, the 7 virtues. 7 ladies. So for us men, it's very important. If you do good governance, if you are thinking about how we should have a vision for the long term, our facts, our science, our political ideas, they are only half of what we need. We need also our virtues, our values, where we are rooted in and we are living in. And this is something we also have to bring back in our projects as politicians, but also as scientists. I think that's also very important. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Hein and Esther, for your presentations. Yeah, we have just a few minutes to go, but I asked, because you see in the 2 presentations some contradictories, but I think it's good. So I asked them ahead, would you reflect on each presentation? So ladies first, I would say. Would you reflect on the presentation of Hein?
Yes, thank you for that invitation and thank you for the interesting presentation. I am delighted to hear yourself describing as champion of drainage. And I think the awareness of the water boards that it's now about storing at the source, storing at the brook systems. Well, that awareness is increasing and that's so valuable. And I think that is the first step to real recovery of our systems in the Netherlands. So I was very happy about that. And in Brabant, in the south of the Netherlands, we cooperate a lot with water boards. It's a very important partner for us. And I noticed there that real nature restoration, so marshy areas, is co-financed by the water boards because they see these areas as highly important climate buffers. So it's not only about working with farmers on their lands to decrease the problems a little bit, but quite drastic changes in the whole landscape, whole land change system to nature, which is of course very important for the people living around the area, for recreation, for combating droughts and floods. And I don't notice you mentioning such solutions in your area. Perhaps you are doing that, but I was curious to hear your more drastic land use changes. How do you deal with that? Especially, which you also hardly mentioned, now in times of the nitrogen crisis in the Netherlands, where we have heard last week that a lot of the areas around the Natura 2000 areas needs to drastically decrease the nitrogen output. So that could be a great opportunity to work on marshy buffer zones that have completely different production system, like CO2 sequestration, for example.
For example, thank you very much. We don't have a lot of Natura 2000 in our part, and the neighbors have more. They have a bigger challenge, I think. For us, it's important that we show to the future and what can we have as solutions that are sustainable in the next 10, 20, 30 years. What you do with your projects, and you not only for a year or 2 or 3, but also for 40 years, etc. But we do that in showing, looking not only to nature restoration, but also if see possibilities to that the people can live in the area, that the people are still have a healthy environment. If we have the project of every drop counts, then we have 140, 135,000 hectares of agricultural land. But if the projects will be ended in 25 years, we will lose at least more than 7,000 hectares because they will be too wet. But those areas are not near the Natura 2000 areas. So they are in another area. And we don't have the possibilities to have solutions for the Natura 2000 areas and for the restoration of the groundwater levels. No, partly they overlap, but partly they don't overlap. And my biggest question is also my question to you, and I'm giving the ball back, giving a small answer and a bigger question. Where should I focus on the nature from the past, the nature from the present, of the nature of the future?
No, it's a very good question.
Maybe it's also a question for the
Yeah.
members in the room. So please take it.
Yeah, well, as a rewilding organization, the word re is included, but actually we're working more on wilding than on restoring a picture from the past. We are inspired by the past because it learns us a lot about how the system used to function, but we always look at the future and the future opportunities. And to give just one example, if you don't plant trees, you never plant the wrong trees. So that's a lesson we learned. So if we don't have a very specific target, this tree here, this species here, and then nature decides, okay, now the temperature is suitable for species X, and then the species returns automatically or flourishes automatically, then it's what the nature wants there. So then it becomes the future picture of that area without us interfering. But that's easily said, I understand. We always look at ecosystem functions. What do we want to achieve with partners, like the water board? What kind of water table fits to that? Always inspired by the past and look at the ecosystem functions of the future.
Just one Jos.
Jos Beelstadharis. I was more intrigued by one of your statements. I think I completely disagree. Because you said it's really all about sharing same values. I disagree. It's not about sharing same values, it's about telling each other about each own value. So it's really about recognizing that we all have different values. So if you would apply the ecosystem services concept, some value a different type of ecosystem service different than others, and even same will be valued in a different way. So in my opinion, it's all about mutual education, seeing what the values are, and then get into negotiation with each other, and trying to come to a negotiated agreement. We apply this principle of system water law. And the Dutch working together with the farmers and all the seeing what are the values and how can we make it.
I don't disagree with you. And not, sorry. Yeah, no, this is the short answer. No, I think it's a discussion about what are values. Are the values how you look to what you want to achieve in a certain area, or on another level, what is the biggest driver in what you do in your work? Because if profit is the only driver for a farmer, and I don't think that is, then you have more a debate than a conversation. And I think you have to go a step back. And what are the values for him or her? And what is his or her passion? And what we do is we focus more on that we have different views on what is the problem. And I think it's more that's something else than values. But okay, that's maybe. Okay, you disagree. Okay, then we still disagree. Okay, but then we get another discussion about profit, etc. But you said already, it's not only profit, and therefore, then we have a bridge.
Indeed, it's something to have a break later on, I guess. I have a question for Esther. Esther, last week the European Commission launched the nature restoration target. Probably you have heard that. The Green Deal pioneering proposals to restore Europe's nature by 2050 and half pesticides used by the 2030. How do you view the potential of those targets, and will they be reached? What do you think are the main barriers in there?
I feel that there's a big momentum, and we see the European Union awareness increasing. So that's good news. But what I do notice is that in many state countries, especially the Netherlands, nature restoration is seen as a kind of obligation, administrative burden, tick in the box, 100 hectares of juniper trees, very focused on habitat types administration, while there is so much less celebration of what you can achieve with nature. So I think we should much more highlight these nature-based solutions potentials, start many more pilots for that, and then on a big scale. We were able to do that in the Room for River approach, and now in the Netherlands at least you see a more sectoral approach. So nature only department has money for nature. Delta program only has money for water safety and combating droughts. You see, as a nature organizations, we have to talk to like 5 ministries, municipalities, provinces, everyone with his own money. And I see a lot less integration of funding sources. And that's one of the biggest challenges I see. You need integrated funding sources to have integrated solutions.
I fully agree with that. On behalf of the time,